Hi, Assassins! I'm Brooke.
And I'm Cami.
Welcome to Bookish Realms.
We're just two girls who can't stop talking about fantasy books.
Welcome to our deep dive of Crown of Midnight. This episode covers chapters 6 through 10 of Crown of Midnight. Like in past episodes, the chapter summaries and character discussion are spoiler-free, but the rest of the pod does include spoilers for all of Throne of Glass. This podcast is for mature audiences only. Cami, take it away, girl.
Let's get into some chapter summaries. As a reminder, this is a non-spoiler section where we summarize the chapters we'll cover in this episode. So if you haven't read the entire series, but you have read chapters 6 through 10 of Crown of Midnight, you can listen to this section. Chapter 6. Celaena's evening takes a spooky turn when her amulet starts glowing outside the library when she encounters a person, or a creature. She heads down to Elena's tomb during a lunar eclipse and meets Mort, a sassy, talking, bronze skull door knocker who doesn't hold back. Turns out, Elena left a cryptic warning about a bigger threat, bigger than Cain or the Ritterak. What's the warning? Oh, just that there's a deadly force threatening all of Aurelia. Celaena, naturally, wants nothing to do with it, especially when Mort brings up her parents. But Elena has once again sent our girl on another mission. Chapter 7. The next morning, Celaena is still fuming about her chat with Mort and Elena's doomed prophecy. But duty calls. She needs to dig into the king's shady dealings. Her target? Archer Finn, her next assignment. Celaena hatches a plan to fake his death while squeezing him for intel on the rebel movement. Step 1. Orchestrate a chance meeting. Step 2. Rope Kale into it. Chapter 8. Tea time drama. This whole scene is giving Bridgerton. Celaena and Kale bump into Archer at the Willow's Tea Court and things get juicy. We find out that Archer trained at the Assassin's Keep, so there's some history there. He even brings up Sam. Celaena arranges a dinner date and, surprise, surprise, Kale gets a little jealous. Celaena, of course, reassures him by trash-talking Archer's annoying pet name for her, Lena. The plan is in motion. Chapter 9. Celaena takes a trip to the dungeons to check on Kaltain, who's in rough shape thanks to Duke Parrington's betrayal and being locked up. Kaltain's ramblings about crows and headaches, creepy and cryptic. Despite their past beef, Celaena shows a softer side, giving Kaltain her cloak. Later, she chats with Nehemia about the court's corruption and the former glory of Terrasen. Chapter 10. Dorian and Kale discuss the return of Dorian's bratty younger brother, Holland. Meanwhile, Celaena's gearing up for her dinner with Archer, rocking a red dress that has Kale all kinds of flustered. At dinner, Archer's flirting game is strong, but Celaena flips the script and drops a bomb. Surprise, the king has ordered her to kill him.
Welcome to Character Discussion. Here, we'll cover what we've learned about each main character and some side characters and track their character development. This section is also spoiler-free. Let's start with our girl, Celaena Sardothien. She continues to evolve as a complex and layered female main character in these chapters of Crown of Midnight. Her internal struggles, survival instincts, and growing sense of identity shine through as she navigates her past, present, and uncertain future. When confronted with the accusation, "You're that selfish, that cowardly, why did you come here tonight, Celaena? To help us all, or to help yourself?" Celaena is forced to examine whether her actions stem from courage or self-preservation. Her instinct to put herself first is rooted in her painful past, but this moment marks a turning point. She's beginning to see the weight of her choices and their impact on others, signaling a shift from mere survival to something more purposeful. Similarly, her casual reply to Archer's question, "Does Arobin know you're back? He has eyes everywhere. I'd be surprised if he didn't know," masks the emotional toll of her connection to Arobin. Once her manipulative mentor, Arobin represents a shadow she's still working to escape. This exchange highlights both her strength and the lingering scars of her past. Amidst the tension, Celaena's relatability shines through. At a state dinner, she struggles to restrain herself, admitting it took all of Celaena's self-control to keep from sprinting down the long table in the center of the room and horking down the food. These moments of humor and humanity remind us that beneath her assassin's exterior, she's still a young woman, balancing the pressures of survival with everyday desires. Her empathy also surfaces when she recognizes bitterness in someone else, reflecting she's also grown up without choices and recognized the glimmer of bitterness. Her ability to connect with others' pain shows emotional growth and hints at the compassionate person she's becoming. The most moving moment comes when Celaena recalls her brief taste of freedom with Sam. She had a flicker of a memory, a freedom that she was still working for. This memory both is heartbreaking and motivating, underscores her ultimate goal, not just survival or revenge, but true freedom on her own terms. By chapters 6 through 10, Celaena is no longer the arrogant assassin of Throne of Glass. She's evolving into a young woman, learning to balance vulnerability with strength and caution with courage. Haunted by her past, but shaping her own destiny, Selena proves why she remains one of the most compelling heroines in fantasy. Whether she's plotting against the king, strapping knives to her leg, or eyeing a feast with impatience, she's captivating us at every single turn. Next up, our boy Kale. Kale's devoted exterior begins to crack in these chapters, revealing a man torn between duty and emotion, and his complex past. His growing feelings for Selena are undeniable, especially when jealousy over Archer flares up. All he'd really been able to think about was how much he wanted to slam Archer's pretty face against the stone building. For the disciplined captain of the guard, this raw emotion shows us just how deeply Selena has shaken him. Though Kale insists he's not the possessive type, his thoughts, like the thought of her susceptible to Archer's charms, made him want to have a little chat with the courtesan, betray his vulnerability. These feelings, paired with the guilt over his relief at Archer's potential death, highlights Kale's internal struggle between his moral compass and his emotions. Kale's past also surfaces when Dorian reflects on his estrangement from his family. Since Kale had abdicated his title as heir of Enel, he hadn't seen his family in years. Dorian could gleefully kill Kale's father for disowning him. This sacrifice speaks to Kale's quiet strength, but also reveals the deep scars of rejection that still drive him. By chapters 6 through 10, Kale is more than the dutiful captain of the guard. His loyalty to the crown and his feelings for Selena increasingly crash, forcing him to confront who he is and what he stands for. Disciplined yet vulnerable, Kale's journey is one of self-discovery, and these chapters set the stage for his continued growth. Next, our Crown Prince. Dorian Havillard begins to emerge as a deeper and more conflicted character in these chapters, moving beyond the role of the charming Crown Prince. As he wrestles with his unreturned feelings for Selena, frustrations with the court, and his place in the world full of manipulation, we see cracks in his polished facade, hinting at significant personal growth. Dorian's years in the cutthroat world of court politics have taught him to keep his emotions hidden. But for years of living in this festering court, Dorian kept from doing anything but looking gloriously bored. This carefully maintained detachment has served as his shield, protecting him from the games and betrayal of nobility. However, it also leaves him emotionally isolated, and in these chapters, we see the mask slipping as his emotions begin to surface. His temper flares more frequently now, revealing frustration and inner turmoil. His sharp response, "If you have something to say, then just say it," signals his struggle to maintain control while asserting himself in moments of tension. This isn't just about his feelings for Selena, but a broader frustration with being underestimated and used by those around him. His friendship with Kale also takes a bittersweet tone. Quote, "They had managed, at least for the afternoon, to not talk about her, and for those few hours it had been like nothing had ever changed between them. But things had changed." Dorian's awareness of this growing tension between them shows his emotional maturity. While their bond remains strong, the shift in their dynamic reflects how both men are evolving and how their relationships are inevitably affected by their feelings for Selena. One of the most striking moments of introspection comes with Dorian's bitter observation. "The same way an assassin from Endovir used me to become king's champion." This line captures his growing disillusionment. Whether manipulated by Selena, his father, or the court, Dorian begins to see himself as a pawn in a larger scheme. This realization is crucial. It marks the beginning of his questioning the roles others have assigned him and his desire to reclaim control over his life. By chapters 6 through 10, Dorian is no longer content to remain on the sidelines as the charming prince. His jealousy, anger, and introspection reveal a young man wrestling with heartbreak, loyalty, and the desire to define his own identity. His evolution is as much about letting go of his unreturned feelings for Selena as it is about embracing his vulnerability, complexity, and potential for a greater purpose. These chapters give us a glimpse of Dorian, who is beginning to step out of his father's shadow and carve out his own path. He's grappling with hard truths, but in doing so, he's growing into a character with depth, resilience, and capacity for change that makes us root for him a little more. Next, on to the side characters. I don't know who I think I am. It's giving Mariah Carey, even though I am nowhere near my good sis. But anyways, side characters, Archer Finn. Archer Finn's introductory brings out an air of mystery and complexity to the story. Described as the most beautiful man she'd ever seen, not handsome, beautiful. Archer's allure is undeniable, but his charm is more than skin deep. His broad, muscle shoulders and powerful frame, paired with a knowing smile, radiate confidence, hinting at a man who has mastered the art of survival in a cutthroat world. Yet, beneath this polished exterior lies a layered and conflicted individual. Archer's past revealed much about who he is today. Discovered as a 12-year-old orphan, running wild in the capital streets, He was thrust into a life shaped by Clarice, a powerful madame. His beauty became both his weapon and his cage, culminating in events like his bidding party, where the rumors of actual brawls broke out among would-be patronesses. Despite the seeming glamour, Archer's life has been defined by survival, sacrifice, and lack of autonomy. He's not just a courtesan, though. Selena remembers him as a formidable opponent when training at the Assassin's Keep, a reminder that his charm masks a capable and dangerous man. This duality, courtesan and fighter, raises the question about his true intentions. Is he simply a man adapting to survive, or does he have deeper motives that will challenge Selena's mission? The most moving look into Archer's character comes when he admits, "Someday I'll have enough money to pay off Clarice forever, to really be free and live on my own." This dream of freedom humanizes him, revealing his struggle for agency in a life that has always been dictated by others. In this, he mirrors Selena. Both are trapped in roles they didn't choose, yearning for independence. Archer Finn is introduced as more than just a beautiful face. He is a man with a complex history, hidden strength, and a desperate desire to reclaim his life. These chapters set the stage for a character who could become an ally, a rival, or something far more dangerous, leaving us eager to see how his story unfolds. Next up, we have my favorite side character, I think, of the whole series, Mort. Mort, the talking bronze door knocker attached to Elena's tomb, brings a unique mix of humor and mystery to Crown of Midnight. From the moment Selena encounters him, his snarky personality shines. "Oh, don't be so pathetic. I'm attached to this door. I cannot harm you." His sharp wit and blunt demeanor provide comic relief, but Mort's true purpose runs deeper. As a product of ancient magic, Mort embodies the enduring power of word marks. He explains, the king cannot erase old spells made with older powers, like the word marks. Those ancient spells still hold, especially ones that imbue life. This insight highlights the limits of the king's control and roots Mort in the rich history of King Brandon's reign. His role as a guardian is underscored when he reveals, "Not even the strongest man in the world could peel me off this door." Though Mort claims, "I do not breathe, nor do I eat or drink, I simply exist." His lively personality and sarcasm make him feel more animated than some living characters. Placed by King Brandon to watch over Elena's tomb, Mort isn't just a quirky addition, he is a keeper of secrets and a guide. Mort's blend of humor, cryptic knowledge, and ties to ancient magic makes him a fascinating addition to the story. Whether he's begrudgingly answering questions or delivering snarky commentary, Mort deepens the lore while adding an entertaining spark to the narrative. Next up, we have Caltaine. Caltaine Rompier, once the poised and cunning beauty of the court, is now a shadow of her former self. The once beautiful lady was curled against the wall, her dress soiled and her dark hair unbound and matted. Her descent from polished noblewoman to a neglected prisoner is stark, emphasizing the cruelty of the court and how easily power is stripped away. Selena observes, "She looked so much younger with her ebony hair unbound. She couldn't be much older than Selena herself." This realization repositions Caltaine as less of a rival and more of a tragic figure, a woman manipulated, discarded, and left to suffer. Caltaine's suffering is not only physical, but deeply tied to abuse and control. She reveals the bruises circling her wrists and admits, "The Night Watch looks the other way when parenting visits." This haunting confession highlights the systematic complexity and the depth of her isolation. Her quiet "don't" when Selena approaches reflects fear and a complete loss of agency, making her plight all the more heartbreaking. Once ambitious and calculated, Caltaine is now a tragic symbol of how the court crushes those who lose their usefulness. Her fall hints at both the dangers of ambition and the resilience she may yet discover. Though her circumstances are dire, her story leaves readers wondering if she'll remain a victim or rise again, transformed by the hardships she's endured.
Let's explore this world. Here we cover the main world-building elements that come up in chapters 6 through 10. We'll revisit these places and world-building elements in other episodes. For today, this section is not spoiler-free, so if you haven't finished the entire series, please do not continue. But please come back when you have. If you remember, we explored the disappearance of magic in Aurelia last episode, and it's still a central theme here. But now things get even more interesting. In our previous deep dives, we've talked about word marks and how their existence proves not all magic has disappeared. There's a distinction between old magic and new magic. Let's talk about that moment with Mort, our fave sassy door knocker. Selena's reaction says it all. She's completely stunned that this kind of magic could still exist. She even thinks she might have hit her head. And honestly, can you blame her? Magic has been gone for 10 years. Or so she thought. When Mort tells her, new magic doesn't, but the king cannot erase old spells made with older powers, like the word marks. Those ancient spells still hold, especially ones that imbue life. It reveals so much about the magical system in Aurelia. This means the king's suppression of magic hasn't erased it completely. Modern magic, recent spells, enchantments, the kind of magic healers used, is gone. But ancient magic, that's different. It's older, deeper, and to some extent, it's beyond the king's control. It's been embedded in the very fabric of the world for centuries. Mort is proof of that. He's not alive, he doesn't breathe or eat, but he's still there, animated, and that's thanks to these ancient powers. Then there are the word marks. We've seen hints of their power before, but this chapter really connects the dots. In chapter 6, Selena visits Elena's tomb again and notes on the layout of the tomb. The walls were all etched with word marks, the ancient symbols that could be used to access a power that still worked, a power that Nehemia and her family had long kept secret. That's a big deal. As we've covered in previous world-building sections, these marks aren't just symbols. They end up being central to the series as a whole. They access a power that's still very much alive. In these chapters, Selena also thinks about how dangerous word marks could be in the hands of the wrong person. If someone like Cain can use them to summon creatures or tap into dark forces, imagine what someone like the king could do if he unlocked their full potential. While the king may be able to suppress magic to some extent, the true nature of magic still eludes him, which we see through the word marks and Mort. Magic can never truly be controlled or erased. It's part of this world in a way that the king doesn't seem to fully understand. Social hierarchy and court structure. It's not a world-building section if we don't talk about the social hierarchy and the court. Let's start with the Willows, also known as the Tea Court. This place is pure status. It's exclusive, requiring a very hard-to-attain membership. Selena herself remembers visiting as a child, only because Arabin Hamel's name carried enough weight to get her in. Now picture this. She could still recall the clink of porcelain, the hushed gossip, the mint and cream painted room, and the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked an exquisite garden. It's not just a tea house, it's a symbol of wealth and privilege. The Willows isn't about the tea, it's about who's seen there. We get a clear sense of social performance. Beautiful carriages, beautifully dressed women, all part of the elite's carefully curated image. Even the gossip is hushed, like everything at this level is just so refined. But make no mistake, power and influence are being traded here, one cup of tea at a time. It's giving Bridgerton, honestly. And that brings us to another layer of court politics, attitudes toward learning. It's almost ironic. In a castle teeming with power plays, reading and intellectual pursuits are out of fashion. Selena reflects on this as she leaves the library thinking, in a court where reading was so out of fashion, perhaps it was merely some courtier trying to hide a passionate love of books from his or her sneering friends. It's such a telling moment. Knowledge is power, but in Rifthold's court, it's almost seen as a weakness, a sign you're not playing the game right. This disdain for learning only deepens the sense of superficiality. It's all about appearances, and books don't seem to necessarily fit that mold. Now let's talk about class distinctions and the power structure. The state dinner scene really lays it out for us. There's a strict social order here, starting with the king and the queen at the central table. Surrounding them are the inner court members and council members, those closest to power. And then, further back, we have the lesser nobility seated at separate tables. It's more than just seating arrangements. This setup reflects a rigid hierarchy where proximity to the king equals influence. Everyone knows their place, and that place defines their worth. The noble dine in luxury, while the servants remain invisible. This separation reinforces the idea that power isn't just about magic or strength. It's about where you sit, who you talk to, and how closely you orbit the throne.
This is our analysis and foreshadowing section, which is not spoiler-free. We'll break down parts of the text that tie into or foreshadow future events in the series. If you have not read all of Throne of Glass, please do not continue.
During this set of chapters, Selena meets Mort, and I just want to set the scene for us. She meets Mort during an eclipse, which really mirrors the first time that she meets Elena, which is during Samhain or Samhain. We just think that's really interesting because, they're both kind of like these celestial events. Samhain is like a time when the veil is thin. And now we've got this eclipse and she's down there again. And then she meets Mort. It's an interesting little tidbit for us. But Selena enters this passageway and she notes 3 archways. Quote, the 3 stone archways greeted her. The one on the far left led to a passage that allowed for spying on the Great Hall. The one in the center led to the sewers and the concealed exit that might someday save her life.
Which I think it's so funny that she notes about the exit might saving her life. But in reality, I guess it technically could have saved her life because it saves Rowan and Dorian's life later on. And I think, is that Era of Fire that happens, or Queen of Shadows? I think it's Queen of Shadows, right?
Queen of Shadows, yeah.
That
And they
sounds
like
more accurate.
that's the passageway they used to like escape.
Yeah, it's the passageway that Rowan, I'm pretty sure she like tell Rowan about that passage too, because how else would he have known about it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think she does tell him about it because I remember they like that's how they get away.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is just so interesting, like, because essentially, like, Rowan is her mate, so like if he would have died, like, who would have known how that would have affected her? So, and like Dorian is her BFF, so it did save her life in a sense.
And if she had like never gone down into these passageways, they wouldn't have known. I mean, honestly, nothing in the book could have happened if she didn't go down into these passageways, but like still, it's interesting. As she like heads down there, she again, like, there's so many times in Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight where like she experiences like deep sense of dread. She says, quote, "Perhaps this hadn't been a good idea. Perhaps the answers weren't worth it." And it's just like, again, she just doesn't want to open this door yet. She doesn't want to like deal with any of this yet, you know?
And, you know, like when she gets down there, she has her first encounter with Mort, and she's like grappling with this feeling of dread. And Mort's like, "Hey, I'm here." And she's like, "What the hell is happening?" She's like, "Who is this? Why are you on the door? Why are you speaking to me?" And, you know, like Mort reveals this crucial world building about magic quote where he says, "Everything in this world is magic."
It has to be like so jarring for her to go down there and be like, "Oh, okay, here's this like door knocker that's like moving." And I just have to like keep going. And like, it's not like she doesn't get a lot of time to like dwell on his info download for her, even is. But also, have you seen Beauty and the Beast?
Yeah.
Okay. All of the like the moving plates and like candlesticks and like all of those things in Beauty and the Beast. Am I thinking of the right movie?
Yeah, that's the right movie.
Yeah. This is like, that's how I picture Mort. But she even asks Mort, like, how do you exist? How are you like possible? And that's when he says, new magic doesn't, but the king cannot erase old spells made with older powers, like the word marks. Those ancient spells still hold, especially ones that imbue life.
So, one of our favorite moments in this scene is when Mort gives a reaction to Selena introducing herself. Quote, "What is your name?" "Selena Sardothian," she grounded out. The skull barked a laugh. "Oh, that's too funny. The funniest thing I've heard in centuries. Be quiet. My name is Mort, if you must know." Mort thinks that this is so funny because he actually knows that she's Aelin Galathinius. And it's so funny to me because she's just like, "Yeah, I'm Selena." And he's like, "Yeah, no, the fuck you're not. Actually, you're not Selena." And there's like 2 times in this scene where he like, when he initially says it, and then like when she walks into Elena's tomb, he like laughs to himself. He's like, "Oh, that's Selena Sardothian." Like, okay. Like, I just think it's so funny because it again like hints to like Selena is not who she says she is. Like, and she knows deep down, like obviously that she's Aelin, but she continues to just like keep hiding this identity. And I think like anytime that it like is brought up, she just gets like really frustrated about it because she's like, "I'm not trying to deal with that trauma right now. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to hear about it." But I just think it's funny that Mort is like, "Psych, yeah, you think you're Selena." If you say so.
Yeah, he just like sees right through her. He's like, all right, whatever you say. And I think it's like interesting too, because like obviously maybe Elena just told him who she is, but I also think he's magic and like maybe he senses like her lineage in some magical way. I mean, she's related to both of the people in this tomb. And I think he says like Brandon himself put Mort there. And like Mort cannot be removed by anyone. So it's just like, it's just so funny. He's just like, "Yeah, whatever you want to call yourself, girl. Like, we both know who and what you are." So that's funny.
It is funny.
After this like funny encounter with Mort, Selena enters Elena's tomb, which we've seen like a couple times by this point in the series, but she describes it again as, quote, 2 stone sarcophagi lay in the center, one depicting Gavin, Elena's husband, and the first king of Otterland, and the other, Elena. Her silver hair spilled over the side of the coffin, disrupted only by the crown atop her head and the delicately pointed ears that marked her as half human, half fae. It's so interesting because like the tomb is really like this crucial puzzle piece, and she visits it so many times, and every time she visits it, she takes note of all these things. The stars, the word marks, the carvings, all of that. It takes her so long to realize like, hey, I need to start taking this puzzle apart, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, she's been down there a couple times, and like up until this point, like you said, she doesn't realize like or recognize that like, oh shit, like because we at this point we know that it's flipped, right? Like we know that the stars and stuff are on the ground, and like the sky is in the air or whatever, or the ground is in the air. Because I remember like in the previous episode, I think it was, is when we first find that out. She like says something about it and she recognizes it, but she doesn't really actually put two and two together. Like, oh shit, like this might actually be important, because she's still grappling with the fact that like she's Selena Sardothian. She's not Aelin Galathinius. Like, why does it matter to her? You know?
It really like shows you like she's so even like internally separated from seeing Elena as one of her ancestors. She doesn't even wonder if these things were left behind for people in her lineage. She's just kind of like, she treats Elena as like some random lady who is making these requests, as if Elena is not like related to her, you know? But then it's like, then more is like, Elena left a message for you. And again, Selena just has this like feeling of dread before receiving the message. She says, quote, Selena had a feeling of standing in front of a cresting wave, waiting for it to break. It could wait. The message could wait. The oncoming burden could wait for another moment or two of freedom. And that shit just like hits. Like she does not want to deal with this. Like none of it. She just doesn't. Like, I think at this point, she obviously has no idea of like the nameless prophecy or like all the things she'll be asked to do. But she's still just like, she knows it's big. She knows it's not like some tiny little ask, like, oh, win the competition. It always feels like so much bigger than her.
And you know, there's this other part in there where Selena's like, and I have to find it, I suppose. And Elena's like, yes, there will be clues that lead you to it. Signs you must follow. Refusing to kill the king's targets is only the first and smallest step. And I feel like right there, that alone kind of just like shows her like, I'm already defying the king, which could literally get the people I love their heads taken off and mine. And this is the smallest. Like, this is the smallest thing that you're asking me to do. Like, what, like, literally what the fuck else could come after? Also, like, everything with Kane and the Ritterack and, like, just seeing all of that. And her just being like, I'm simply not ready. I'm simply just a girl. I'm simply just trying to, like, have some taste of freedom. And you're telling me that this is just the beginning.
Yeah. It's like, you just really feel like, I don't know, she just doesn't want to even get involved with this shit. And she just keeps getting dragged back into it, which is literally like the entire series as a whole. Like, obviously, we would never have like Aelin Galathinius if none of this happened. But even here, like, she would have been content being Selena and just living out her life as Selena. And Elena, like, even notes on that. She says, quote, if I could leave you in peace, I would. But you have lived your life aware that you will never escape certain burdens. Whether you like it or not, you are bound to the fate of this world. As the king's champion, you are now in a position of power, and you can make a difference in the lives of many. Like, it's just, it hits so hard when you know what you are bound to the fate of this world like means, you know? And like, I'm not an Elena like apologizer, but like I do think to some extent, like Elena must feel bad about how her major fuck up has now like caused all of this to happen for Selena / Aelin.
Yeah, and I think it's like so funny how she says like you are bound to the fate of this world. Like Aelin wouldn't have been bound to the fate of this world if Elena would have just followed through on what the fuck she was supposed to do to begin with, you know? So like I feel like there are times like throughout the series where like you kind of do see like Elena not resenting, what's the word? Regretting like her decision of not locking Erwan away or not killing him to begin with. But I just like, I don't know, it's just really fucked up because it's like you're sitting here and telling her like you're bound to the fate of this world, knowing like you're the reason. Like you're literally the reason, sister. Like you're the reason why she's bound to the fate of this world. And then she goes on, like Elena goes on to say, Kane and the Ritterack were just the beginning of the threat to Aurelia. Mort said, Or sorry, this was Mort, not Elena. There are far deadlier powers poised to devour the world. The devour the world thing, we are going to talk about that again in the Maas verse, because if you know, you know, but we'll talk about that in the Maas verse.
And again, like Selena is just, and Aelin, like they're the same person, but like she's just so against this concept of fate. Like she fights back against it so many times. She literally says there's no such thing as fate. And Mort starts like arguing back and lists all these things. Like, you were brought here on Samhain. Says the girl who spent a year in Endovier, says the girl who knows that the gods care no more for our lives than we care for an insect beneath our feet. He just like tries to like put in her like brain, like, but look at all these things that led you here.
And then like the last thing that her and Mort talk about before she like goes back up to her rooms is Mort mentions, "You're that selfish, that cowardly. Why did you come here tonight, Selena? To help us all or just to help yourself? Elena told me about you, about your past." Selena's iconic response, "Shut your rutting face." Mort calls her literally the one thing that she doesn't want to be called, which is cowardly. I think like this also was kind of a realization for Selena that like she is not just somebody that can sit down and do whatever is being like asked of her and like coming to her. Like it gets her to realize and like open her eyes that like she's gonna have to help people. Like that's just simply like what she's gonna have to do. Like that's the path that she's gonna have to take. So I just think that it's just so like that whole part right there was just really crazy.
Yeah. And like also Mort brings up, "I'm sorry about your parents." And like that just really sets her off. She's like, "Don't talk about my parents. Don't bring them up." And it really like escalates their like they're fighting basically. Like this is not like a friendly conversation between the two of them, but it's like so obvious how much bringing up her past and bringing up her family like really sets her off. And I think part of it too is just because like all of these things about her fate and like what she should be doing, and like, you know, she's had all these experiences, like the year in Endovier, like her thought process about the gods and like not killing the people that she's supposed to be killing. All of those things are like tied into her fate, and she hates it when like that is brought up in the context of like, "Hey, you're like the rightful queen of Terrasen. What are you doing?" You know, it's just, yeah. You really feel for her though. Like she just wants to be normal.
Yeah, I feel like she like is always grappling with that like sense of like wanting to have that normalcy, but like knowing that will like never be her. So then when this does come up about her, like it does bring up this sense of like anger in a sense, because she's like, fuck, I just want to live and like I can't. And she knows that she can't because she still has like this tie to the king, where like she still has to be the king's champion, knowing that she's not going to fully be free, knowing that she still has to like deal with that, but then also still has to deal with like this shit that happened in her past with like the Endovier, the parents, and all that stuff. So just like all of those things combined, I just feel like anything that's like not in the present that gets brought up, she's like, simply leave it.
Yeah.
Simply leave it. We are always on iWatch here on Book of Strom's pod, because if you know, you know. But whether it's looking for subtle hints SJM leaves us about Selena's Ash River eyes, or trying to figure out who's Valk possessed, eyes in the series are everything. Let's start with Roland's eyes. At this point, Roland is not possessed by a Valk, at least not yet. So how do we know? Quote, "He couldn't like Roland. She had nothing more than gut feeling and Kale's story to go by, but there was something about Roland's emerald eyes that made her want to pull Dorian as far away from him as possible. Dorian was playing a dangerous game too," she realized.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, Roland's eyes are green. Like he doesn't have the telltale black eyes that like a Valk possessed person has. But like from when we first meet Roland at the beginning of this book, like he has bad vibes. Like maybe it's just like a bad aura, but Selena knows that she has to like keep her eye on him, you know?
And we also know that Selena is watching Dorian, Roland, and Kale during the state dinner. And Roland just like, even from afar, she's like, this dude is just not it. Like I simply just am getting like an icky, I don't know, like, you know, when you have those like gut feelings and you're like, this person is not safe. That's how she's feeling. Like she's like, he is not a safe person, and I need to help the people that I care about to make sure that they also are not like, that they are not around this safe person or this unsafe person. But let's talk about our good sis and her eyeballs.
Her eyeballs.
Her
So
eyeballs.
in our like Throne of Glass deep dive, the one person that kept noticing Selena's eyes over and over again was Dorian. I think he calls them like striking at one point, like what striking eyes you have. He like says that they're like he's getting lost in them. And we know that Selena's eyes are turquoise with a like rimmed with gold or like gold streaks. And that those eyes are what give her away as like being an Ash River. In Crown of Midnight, because Kale and Selena are getting closer and closer, Kale starts noticing her eyes too. He says, quote, the gold streaks in her turquoise eyes were bright in the afternoon sun. And even though obviously he doesn't put this together until literally like the last page of the book, it's so SJM to be like, oh, do you know her eyeballs? Do you know what her eyeballs look like? And two, one thing that he starts noticing is that she doesn't look at the king. And he notices, like, when he finds out who she is, that's one of the things that comes to his brain, that she is always avoiding looking at the king directly because the king met her when she was a kid. And maybe the king knows about the Ash River eyes. I don't think so, but like, she just knows my eyes are what give me away. And I can't make direct eye contact with someone who could potentially figure that out.
And you know what's crazy is Dorian actually like talks about her eyes in like one of the very first chapters of Throne of Glass. Like he mentions her eyes and like what her eyes look like. But I do think that the king actually mentioned something. I don't know if this is in Kingdom of Ash or where I think it was in that moment that they have like when she's locking the gates and or the keys into the gate where he talks about like how he didn't notice at first. But like if he would have noticed, he would have known that it was those Ash River eyes. Or there was like some part, I don't know, remember where it was in Kingdom of Ash, but I feel like I swear there was a part where he mentioned something of like, I should have known from those eyes that you were who you are. Do you remember what
Oh my
I'm talking
God.
about?
We need to pull out Kingdom of Ash before the next deep dive because I don't remember that.
I could have swore there was a part in there that
I believe you.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's talk. Yeah, can I introduce them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's talk about my favorite couple, my initial ship of this series, Kale and Selena. I know, I love Rowan. However, I was all in for these two. I love them together. I think you sent me this TikTok of like, we find out, well, not we don't find out, but like, all in all, Kale and Selena are together for 1 week.
7 days.
Crown of Midnight.
7 days they are together. And he was acting the way he was acting for 7 whole days.
In his defense, the slow burn was slow burning. Okay.
For what
the
day?
slow burn was slow burning. It was slow burning. Like I feel like even at the end of Throne of Glass, like you really start seeing them, you start seeing how they could end up together. And then they have like a decent amount of banter in these first few chapters of Crown of Midnight where like we're obviously being set up to like want them to be together, Yeah. But like their relationship is like really developed through like these small moments. Like when they're about to fake bumping into Archer. And she wanted to walk to the tea place because she wanted to see the city on the arm of the captain of the guard. And I just love that line. I think it's really cute.
It is cute. She just wants a normal moment. Any sense of normalcy,
Yeah.
our sis is like, I'm here for it. Like she just wanted a normal moment with her man, which like, why not? We all just want a normal moment with our person, because we know that Selena is this like fierce girl. Like she's a girl, she's out here in a hard world, but she just wants like to just hold her man.
I love seeing those like really feminine moments from her when we know like, yeah, she's a deadly assassin. She's a badass fire breathing bitch queen, but she's still like feminine in her own way and seeks out like the comfort of a partner in her own way, which I think is like, honestly, if I'd read this book when I was a teenager, I would have wanted to be her. I still like kind of want to be her, but like it's so important for like young girls especially, because like this is YA up until a certain point. Like
Yeah.
to see stuff like this, like you can be badass, maybe not see stuff like you can kill people, but like you can have all these like badass traits and still
Mhm.
want to see the city on the arm of your man.
So we also get this like sense of jealousy, but also emotional vulnerability after Sam is mentioned. So Archer brings up Sam and what happened at Farron's house. Selena reaches out to Kale for comfort, which again is just so cute. Like we just love that, like, even though I am a certified Kale hater, at some points throughout this series, okay, like he's good in this book, okay, I will give him that, but like you can't tell him. Anyways, well, we talk about this all the time, but anyways, I think for the moment it's so cute that she reaches out to Kale for comfort, and it's just such a tender moment between the two. It's not just about like the physical closeness, it's also about like that emotional vulnerability, like that the two of them have been able to build in the 7 days that they've been together. But we get Kale's perspective. And the quote says, Kale hadn't tried to initiate conversation, though he was near bursting to say something. All he'd been really able to think about was how much he wanted to slam Archer's pretty face against the building stone. Kale being jealous, who would have ever thunk? Who would have ever thunk the thought that Kale was going to be a jealous boy?
I love it. And he like straight up, he like takes a beat. He like doesn't say anything right away. But then when he does say something, he goes, Lena, he demanded. Like he hates that Archer has a nickname for her, which is like, it's so real. It's so real. We've
Yep.
all been, you know, in a place where like you're crushing on someone and like maybe their friend or like, you know, someone that you're not 100% sure on comes up and they have a little nickname or they have a little inside joke and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You're like, what the actual fuck? And that's him in this moment. He says, I'll be like slightly civil. Like I can't be full on civil, but I want to slam his face into a wall.
I'll do just a little bit of civil. That's fine, I guess. I think it's
I'll do a
also
sprinkle.
yeah, just a little sprinkle of civil. But other
Sprinkle.
than that, you're not getting anything anything other than that. There's also this other iconic moment from the red dress that Selena was wearing. Kale's classic line, "You're not wearing that." Selena with zero hesitation goes, "Oh yes, I am." Like, I don't know who you think you are. I think it's just so funny because it's just like Kale is clearly like, I have a baddie over here and like I need to hide her. I want to put her in my pocket and like I don't want anybody else to look at her or touch her, anything. And Selena's just like, if you're gonna deal with a baddie, you gotta deal with the consequences. So like you just need to shut up. Shut up and just know that they're just looking at me, they're not touching.
Well, and like, you know, she's wearing that dress to go see Archer, like to have dinner with him. And I feel like that really like amps up the tension because he's like, why are you wearing that? And I think she even says like, I want him to wonder if I have like weapons. Like I don't think we have it in this quote, but like she's like, I want him to wonder if I have weapons because the dress is like very revealing. But she also like kind of starts teasing him and says like, I'll see you tomorrow, as if she's not coming home from this dinner with Archer. And Kale, like his teeth flash, which like I always wonder what that actually looks like. He's like, you're not coming home? Like he's like shook. I mean, she does come home, but
Yeah.
also like Selena's like her whole thought process behind saying, I'll see you tomorrow is like she thinks that Kale is like so protective of her because he sees her as like vulnerable or like inexperienced or like foolish. And she's really like starting to wonder if it was like a mistake to let him in. She never wants to be seen as like weak, which I totally get. It's just like really funny that she's like, you won't see me as weak. I'm going to go sleep with that man. He kind of buys it. He's like, tomorrow.
And you know what? Yeah. Like this also like stems from Sam in a sense, because the last time she trusted somebody with her plans that she cared about and that she really, really like was like, this is my man. I love him. He's going to be my man forever. And she told him his plans. He was unalived. So it's not only this like feeling of like her her not wanting Kale to think like, oh, I can't do my job, but it's also simply like she doesn't want to like tell him her plan because it's not easy for her. And like she sees herself as strong, and kind of like you were talking about, like Kale just simply wants to protect her and like wants to like be there. But ultimately at the end of the day, like Selena's like, I'm gonna let you in, but like I'm gonna let you in to an extent because you think that I simply can't handle what, not that she can't handle it, but he thinks that like he needs to be that savior and protector for her when she doesn't need it.
Well, and she's afraid that if he thinks she does need protecting, it's going to get him killed. Because that's what happened with Sam. Like,
Yeah.
she, like you said, like they opened up to each other, shared plans, and that essentially, that closeness to Selena is what got Sam killed. But also, now that we're talking about how Kale and Selena were, once they like hooked up on his birthday night, they were together for 7 days. Sam and Selena were together for like 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
But again, it's the slow burn of it all. It's the slow burn of it all. And being under the circumstances that they're under. It's like falling in love during wartime.
Yeah.
Never have done it. I can imagine though. Never been to war. Never been to war. But I can imagine that it's it like makes everything more intense.
Yeah.
You know? I feel like that's what's happening with these relationship timelines here.
I mean, I guess you're right. Because, I mean, in all reality, this whole entire 8-book series happens within a 1-year span. So
it's crazy.
That's crazy to think about because it feels like it's like over 10 years and you're like, oh shit, wait, actually, and let me slow down. It's over 1 whole year that she like grapples all of these life-changing things in 1 year.
One thing I want to do when we're on summer break is I want us to sit down and make like a full calendar of like this, because there are dates that we can plot out and arrange things all around it. Like we can plot out Samhain because that's always like October 31st, like November 1st. Yulemas is obviously Christmas. There are definitely like things that we can plot out and put everything else in between because I would love to see like how quickly everything happens. It's like, it's like, it's an insane amount of events to happen in 1 year. We should do that as like a bonus thing for our listeners, our assassins.
That would be so fun.
Well,
that would be so fun.
We'll create a little calendar for you.
We can do a little, photo shoot even and like sell a calendar that has like on this date.
God.
You know what I'm talking about? Like on this date, this is when Selena started going by Aelin. Isn't that such a good idea?
That's such a good idea.
But we forgot about Kale understanding the past with Sam.
I mean, I think we kind of got into it a little bit, but after this like whole interaction with Archer on the stairs, one thing that like as Kale is holding in his comment about Archer's nickname for Selena, one thing that he does like think about is that he saw the look on her face when Archer mentioned Sam and starts realizing that the day that she got captured, she wasn't just out like collecting money that she was owed or like on a mission. She went into that house to get revenge. And he even says that it was revenge for the sort of loss he couldn't begin to imagine. And I feel like that really puts a lot of like things in perspective for Kale. Does he understand them in that moment? I don't think so. I don't think he is emotionally mature enough at this point in time. The boy is like 23 years old. Okay. Yeah. But I think he really does start to see like, okay, I think he even says like, he didn't realize that she loved like that before. And that, she had cared for someone in that way. And I think it makes him realize like the heartbreak of her being captured and sent to Endovier was not even so much like being captured and being sent there. It was, she couldn't even get proper revenge for Sam's murder. Like she could not like, and it just like, I don't know. But he really does start understanding like, okay, this is more than just like, they were like kind of connected. This was like a huge loss in her life. That at this point is like pretty recent. It's like a year and a couple months since it had happened, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. R.I.P. to Sam. It's just like that whole thing is just so messed up. Like the fact that like Arobin was the one that like set all this shit off and like he set them up. And it's like these two people that have been under your care, so to say, for so many years. And like this is how you do them because they're trying to literally just like buy their freedom and like they did buy their freedom, and the fact that like Erwin was just like, I don't care if you're free or not, you're still under my control, so I'm gonna dictate when you live and when you die, which is just so fucked up. It's just so sad because they were living so peacefully. And he just had to come and fuck everything up.
Yeah.
So
they literally like had that taste of freedom that she was like after for so long. And like he just took it away. And I'm really glad that Lysandra is the one who got to kill Arabin, and that, you know, he died bleeding out. That feels like justice, yes. But I also like, I think Arabin is so fucking nasty that I wish he had died like a horrible, tortured death, like fingers cut off, like nails ripped out from your nail bed. Like, I don't know what else is considered torture, but like, I wanted to see him fucking suffer.
No, literally same. I think that I was happy that Lysandra killed him because I feel like out of everyone, she was the one that deserved to like kill him. And it's also was like justice for her bestie. Like it was also justice for Selena or for Aelin in a sense. But I was happy that Lysandra killed him, but I also was hoping for some more fucking torture because he deserved it for all the shit he put everybody through. Now on to Dorian. I love Dorian. I am a Dorian stan. In an alternate universe, I love Rowan, but like Dorian and Selena would just have, or Dorian and Aelin would have just made like the perfect king and queen combo. And Sarah, if you ever need like more advice, which I'm sure you get all the time on the internet, you should do like an alternate universe, like what would have occurred if Aelin and Dorian would have been together. Like I simply would pay big bucks for that. I'm sorry, I would pay big bucks for that. Anyways, our boy is really fucking going through these chapters. Like he is really going through it, and his temper is at like an all-time high. Like I simply just did not think that like the crown prince could be like this, but here we are. We get a lot of, which reading back at this, Cami and I have been like talking about this a lot. Like we did not realize how many hints to Dorian's magic was in these chapters, but it's actually insane the amount of times like cold is referenced to Dorian, or like his temper flared and he felt this cold rage, or like there was times where he was like sitting somewhere. I can't remember what the exact quote was, but I think we have it in here somewhere maybe. But yeah, there's just so many references to like his magic in these like first couple chapters of Crown of Midnight, and you're like, holy shit, like it's literally everything is spelled out for us. Sarah was like, here is his magic, and as the readers we're just like reading along, and the whole time our boy had powers this whole time.
Again, SGM is just like a master at like distracting us, and then you go back. That's why honestly it's so important to like reread Throne of Glass with the full understanding of where everything is going, because I don't think I would have ever caught these like hints of like you said, like his cold, like, you know, him being referred as like icy, or like all of these like comments about his temper flaring if we hadn't reread. Like it's just, you don't think about it when you're first reading it through. It just seems like another like way to like phrase something. But I think also like you said, he's really going through it in these chapters, and it's one, like I don't think he's dealing with the breakup as well as Selena is. No. But also I think the breakup like complicates a lot of things for him. And again, like highlights like his real loneliness. And like we've talked about this a lot. When you really think about Dorian, he's got Kale, and that's about it. Like he's got people he seems to hang out with. He goes to these parties, court, whatever. At the end of the day, he's got Kale. He thought he had Selena. And now Selena broke up with him. Kale's hanging out with her all the time, and he knows that. And that really makes their relationship weird too.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent, like Selena knows that. She even like chases him down and is like trying to like protect him from Roland. But Dorian's like not really having it.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's so interesting because like Dorian her and Dorian, so Selena and Dorian have this like heated exchange, and Dorian was saying like the same way an assassin from Endovir used me to become King's champion, and Selena is like telling him like, you know nothing about what I wanted. But I just think it's like it all stems from this like feeling of like him not having autonomy on like his feelings and his life, right? Because he thinks that Selena manipulated the way that he felt about her, when in reality like she did have these feelings about him, but she knows that like ultimately like they could never in whatever world be together while the king was still ruling, because she knows that in deep down that she is Aelin Galathinius. Like she knows that like for his safety and for his sake of like him being the next king and him being able to like go on and be the king that he needs to be, that they just simply can't be together. But he doesn't understand that like that is where she's coming from, because he doesn't have the context or the knowledge to be able to like understand where she is coming from in a sense. But he has these like such strong feelings of like, fuck, like I'm manipulated again, like I just want to like have control, like I have no control, whether it's like from the king, my dad, or like whatever my mom is trying to do with all the like setting me up with a million different ladies, and the one that I finally thought like whole time she just manipulated him, which is not actually the case, but like in his eyes like that's how he sees it.
And like the lead up to this like very tense conversation is also just like interesting to break down,
Mm-hmm.
because it all stems from like essentially like a staring contest. Like
Yes.
Selena is watching Dorian because Selena wants to protect Dorian from Roland, but then Selena is also watching Kale because she likes him.
Mm-hmm.
And Dorian says, quote, Dorian knew Selena was watching him, but she'd also been looking at Kale, and he could have sworn her whole face changed, became softer. And that like sets him off. Like
Mm-hmm.
Dorian seeing how Selena's looking at Kale is what sets him off. And that's when like Selena chases after him and they have this whole conversation where he accuses her of like manipulating him, like you said. And she
Mm-hmm.
even says, like, I know you're angry because your eyes get this cold look. And again, like there's just so
Yes.
many hints. There's so many hints to
Mm-hmm.
that icy power. But yeah,
Yes.
it is really heartbreaking because this conversation doesn't end well. Like,
No.
it's not like they're like, okay, we'll be friends again. She literally like tells him like, don't expect me to care when you find yourself nothing more than a puppet if you
Mm-hmm.
aren't one already.
Which that quote, when I read that, got me, because I was like, he does become a puppet. Like he becomes a puppet when the Valg possess him. And he literally has like, he again is like fighting that internal struggle. I saw this like really cool. I think you might have sent it to me. I don't know. It was a TikTok where it was like somebody had painted Dorian and he was like grappling with like the both sides. I think you sent it to me, didn't you? It was like so,
Yes.
yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Like he always has
Yeah.
these like feelings of like he wants to be this person, but then like he constantly is having to be this puppet. And when he does become the puppet as the Valg, like that is when that feeling, like those feelings like are head on with each other, because he really has no other choice but to face it head on, you know? But yeah, that
Yeah.
part was crazy. I was like, "Ah, the puppet, he is a puppet."
I know. And it's sad too, because like before this whole like conversation goes down, like Selena has said, even before this, like several times, she's like, Dorian is going to be a good king. He's smart and he's kind and like caring and intelligent. And like she sees his potential to be a good king, but their like feelings for each other like just complicate it so much to the point where like when she leaves at the end of this book, like they're still just kind of like it's not resolved. Like
Mhm.
they don't become friends again, and it's so sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
It really is sad. And you know what? There was a point in time where Selena like questions like why hadn't Elena approached him for her tasks, which foreshadows like the future, right? Because this is kind of a moment that where Selena like understands that like he is a person of power. Like I feel like in her gut feeling, like she has a feeling that Dorian can be somebody who is this influence, right? But in the moment she doesn't understand like the implications of her saying like why not just Elena ask him, because ultimately like Dorian could have fulfilled the prophecy, he could have closed the word gate, like he could have done these things and Elena could have went to him, but she went to Selena, which is like whatever.
We don't have to get into it right now, but like he fits he could be nameless is my price. He could fit the
Mhm.
prophecy. And I don't
Mhm.
remember exactly when this is like distinctly said. The gods did not want how Dorian and Selena or Aelin end up forging the lock. That's not what the gods wanted. I don't
Mhm.
remember like when we need to like find it, but when we get further in and like start really breaking down that prophecy, like there's a moment where I think maybe it's Elena, maybe it's someone else, reveals that the gods chose Aelin to be the sacrifice because of her powers.
Mhm.
And I guess at that point, like no one knew how powerful Dorian was going to be. But I
Mhm.
mean, by the end of like Kingdom of Ash, like I don't think anyone really understands how powerful Dorian does end up being. Like
Mhm.
he has raw magic. He can shapeshift. He
Yeah.
can like do all these like things that aren't limited to like fire or whatever. Like he's not
Mhm.
limited to like an element. So I do like wonder like if the gods knew who he would become and what kind of powers he would
Mhm.
have, who they
Yeah.
would have chosen.
And like this has been a huge topic of discussion. I feel like with both of us, like with Cami and I, over the past like week or so, because we've been kind of like, where does Dorian's power come from? Like, where is this like stemming from? Because he does have this raw magic, and like we don't really get to know too much about the king and like what he has going on. Because like obviously we know that the king has some sort of magic, but we're not really privy to know like to what extent do his powers have, because we only see a small sliver of it when him and Aelin are forging the lock together. But like where
Mm-hmm.
like it just questions like where does this magic come from? Because Gavin doesn't have magic, at least to our knowledge. Like when Elaine is talking about
Mm-hmm.
him, like we just know that he's human. So like the other question is like, does it come from his mom? Like I wonder if it comes from his mom's side, or like where does this magic come from? I don't know. That's like a question that I have that I feel like was not answered.
We need to like break down the lineage because I think the answer is
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. Because ultimately, like Gavin was human without powers, but Dorian is also human. He just has
Mm-hmm.
powers. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think Dorian is distantly related to Brannon as well, though. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think at some point we learned that like Dorian's powers come from Mala Firebringer.
Mm-hmm.
His just like manifest as like raw power, while Aelin's obviously manifests as like fire.
Yeah.
But I mean like the lineage of everyone is like we needed to make a family tree. The calendar
No,
and the family
seriously.
tree. It's on
Yeah.
the docket. It's on the docket.
We'll bring it to it's coming to a market near you soon. I don't know.
uh Coltane is next.
Our poor sister. Honestly, this was like when I started to like, because obviously I fucking am not gonna be. I'm gonna be so for real with you. I hated Caltane in the first book, like which is like all of us. We all hated Caltane in the first book, but I feel like this book like really made me sympathize with Caltane a lot, because so much happens to her in the 2 months that she is locked up, and it's just really like the whole Caltane's arc is so sad to me, and I really wish that like we had more time with her. Like I wish that we had more time to like know about her and know like what her backstory is, because like what, and like we're obviously going to get into it right now,
But
but we will also talk about her in a Massverse episode, because I think that like there is some questions that we have about her. So yeah,
yeah.
but go ahead,
And
girl.
we've seen some of the Massverse theories about her as
Yes.
well. I
Yeah.
don't think I necessarily agree with them, but I think they're very interesting to like
Mm-hmm.
break down. But Selena visits Coltane, and it's not a good visit. She's like curled up against the wall. Her clothes are like all messed up. They're dirty. I think her like a like bar like prison cell is like covered in throw up, and she's like curled up in a corner, and Selena even says like her skin is like sweaty and gray and it smells terrible. And
Mm-hmm.
Selena starts trying to like ask her questions, and it's really interesting because here like Selena is like she tries to tell herself like, oh, this is what Coltane deserves for like
Mm-hmm.
poisoning me, but that is not our girl. That's not how
Mm-hmm.
she operates. And I think the turning point, and we will give a trigger warning here that, we're going to talk about some possible like sexual assault and rape that goes on with Kaltain. So that's not something that you can listen to. Just check the show notes. We'll put it in there of like when you can come back, and we've moved past that. But the turning point for Selena in this conversation with Kaltain is when Kaltain shows her wrists. And Selena says like her wrists have these bruises that look like handprints. And then Kaltain says, the guards like look the other way. And it's very obvious that like here we're being hinted at that like Kaltain is being raped or somewhat sexually abused by Duke Parrington, and the guards are letting it happen. Like no one cares that she's just down there and these terrible things are happening to her. And that I think allows for them to like continue that conversation where Kaltain like reveals some interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it's just heartbreaking. Like, obviously, like, we know that, like, Rifthold is not the best of places considering, like, what the king has done. But it's just really unfortunate that, like, I don't know. The whole thing is just really sad. And, like, even though Kaltain, like, did poison Selena, like, nobody deserves that. And, like, it's just really sad that, like, that was in a result of, like, her essentially being manipulated by Parrington. This whole entire time she's been manipulated. And then like not only is he manipulating her, but now he's like also going to the extent where he's like abusing her, which is just the start of like the fucked up things that like he does to her,
I think what's also really heartbreaking is that when we meet Kaltain, like you said, like we don't like her, but to some extent, like as a woman, I did respect Kaltain for wanting to go after Dorian, for wanting power, for wanting influence. Like I can respect that. And it is so heartbreaking to see her in this prison cell being abused, being who knows what from Duke Parrington. It's just so opposite of what Kaltain wanted for herself too. Like she has no agency at this point. No body autonomy. She's just in this cell. Selena even notices like there's like a bucket or something for her to like, use the bathroom in. Like it's just so far from like the Kaltain that we meet in Throne of Glass, who like is all dressed up and like, doing all the court stuff. And now she's just like forgotten at the bottom of the castle, essentially.
That realization like allows for this conversation between Kaltain and Selena to happen. And Kaltain kind of gives her some like cryptic messages about magic and wings. So she says, they encourage the crows to fly past here, and my headaches are worse every day, worse and worse, full of all those flapping wings, which Selena kind of like puts off in a sense because she was addicted to opium. Yeah.
Selena's like, she hasn't gotten her fixed. She's just like hearing things a little bit like.
But whole time it's literally foreshadowing like what's happening in Morath. Like they're literally arming the defenses. They got the wyvern, they got the witches over there. And like I just think it's so interesting. But okay, here's the other interesting part. Doesn't Dorian fly into Morath as a crow?
Oh, I think you're right. I don't know off the top of my head. Yes. He's so many little animals, I don't remember all of his things. Little, but like at one point he's like a mouse.
He is a mouse, yeah. But I just think it's like it's just so interesting, like this early on that like we're not even, because the way that we read Throne of Glass was we read Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, then Assassin's Blade, then Air of Fire. So we had a whole book in between like us getting to the wyvern part. And then it also kind of makes me wonder, like, is she kind of like a siphon from Morath? Like, is she able to like see what's happening in Morath, or like wonder, like it makes me wonder like how deep her connection to Morath actually is,
So this is something I feel like is never truly confirmed. And we kind of touched on this in our like Throne of Glass deep dives, but my like main theory for why she can hear these flapping wings, and Nehemia hears them too, and I think Roland at some point, I think I'm right on that. Roland also hears them. I think it's all tied into that they're all like magic wielders to some extent whose magic has been suppressed. So like Nehemia, yes, she can use the word marks, but like they're all tied into magic some way. And I don't know. I almost envision it like, yes, like they are like keyed into like magic. So obviously I don't think we ever get like a full explanation of how the wyvern are made or what exactly, like, what kind of magic or power is needed to do that. But you have to imagine that it's like big. So I
Yeah.
wonder if it's like these like surges of magic that happen when a wyvern are made, if like people who are sensitive to magic
Mm.
are like keyed into it a little bit, you know?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I just
I don't
keep thinking
know.
about how the wyvern are made in Fourth Wing, and I'm like, I need to separate the two. Like, I need to separate the two. They're not the same.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But no,
Oh
I
my
think
God.
it's just like actually crazy. And then like we also get this super significant moment with Selena's cloak. So Selena sees obviously that like Caltaean is cold. She's in this cell that has nothing but a bucket full of her shit and piss and like her vomit all over the ground. Like she has nothing. And Selena's like, this girl has to be cold. Like she's got to be cold. So she gives her cloak, which is an initial act of kindness, right? Like it's an act of kindness that ends up helping her in the long run, which is kind of like, well, it's not kind of, it is like the overarching theme throughout the whole entire series, which like we're going to talk more about this like once we get closer to the end, which will be a long time from now. But like it's just really crazy because it connects to a quote from Queen of Shadows where it says, tell her that they would not let me bring the cloak she gave me, but I kept a piece of it to remember the promise that she made, to remember to repay her for a warm cloak in a cold dungeon.
All the language around this like act of giving Caltaine the cloak is like so interesting too. Like
Mm-hmm.
Selena, even though again, like she really tries to convince herself that like Caltaine deserves this treatment, that is not who Selena is. And she like, I think it's like she doesn't even hesitate. She just
Mm-hmm.
takes the cloak off and gives it to Caltaine. But like when Selena gets put in the dungeons at the end of this book too, after she tries to kill Kale after Nehemia's death, Caltaine says like, make them pay. Like she
Mm-hmm.
makes Selena promise revenge too, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is really interesting.
Yeah,
So
honestly, I just think that like, yeah, it's so interesting. And then like essentially Caltaine also makes them pay because she blows up half of Morath, which like blows up the crazy ass experiment that we're having in the basement that was gonna like give them more people, you know? Like I don't know. I just
yeah.
really gain like a soft spot for Caltaine like in this set of chapters. And like she has this like realization, like this haunting realization that sometimes I think they brought me here not to marry Parrington, but for another purpose. They want to use me, which also like makes me think like, what does the king and them know that like we didn't as readers? Why was she brought there? Like, is it because like you were saying, like she has magic in her blood somewhere? Like, or like, how did they know this? Like, who, you know what I'm saying? Like, how did they know that?
I don't know. I almost sometimes, and again, I wish we had all the books and I could look at all the evidence, but I
Mm-hmm.
do think like to some extent, like having the Valg power, like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the king has it. I think to some extent it like allows them to pick up on who has magic and who doesn't, you know? But
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I don't know how they know what power she has. Cause I think also, and again, we need to like reference Queen of Shadows as we will revisit Caltaine because she comes up again in this book. I think she even says like Shadowfire was not her original form of power. It was something
Mm-hmm.
else, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I
So
don't remember.
it's just interesting. She has this feeling that there's like a larger purpose for what they're doing to her. And ultimately, she seems to be seen by Parrington slash Erewhon and the king as powerful enough to implant a word key in her arm. That's what they do. And
Yeah.
I think it transforms her into something that is like unrecognizable because like that's why she ends up, you know, blowing up Morath and essentially blowing herself up. Her entire story is like heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. And there's this other thing that she says, what like after she talks about like she feels like they want to use me. She goes, "They never say. When they come down here, they never tell me what they want. I don't remember. It's all just fragments, shards of a broken mirror, each gleaming with its own individual image." Which is so interesting because like just the language here to me is interesting because the broken mirror, like we know that Aelin comes to terms with her prophecy through the witch mirror. So I think it's just, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
just the language here in general is just interesting to me.
Yeah, it's also like if you picture what this looks like, I've never broken a mirror, but when you break it, it's like all in these different parts and you can't really see yourself anymore in it, like as a whole image, which I think like really reflects how Kaltain is feeling. Like she does not feel like herself anymore. She doesn't, I don't think she recognizes herself. And like by the time that Queen of Shadows comes around, like I don't think she feels like she's her. I forget what the quote is exactly, but I think she says something along the lines of like, there's no life for me. Like, that's why she, like, part of the reason why she blows up Morath is like, I think whatever they did to her, just like, it just broke her as like an individual almost.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that, which is sad because she started off as a strong, independent bitch and now she's a dead bitch. I'm sorry. I am on one today. I apologize.
You are emotionally cold right now.
And I'm not usually like this, but it's just like,
I know.
Just flowing out of me today. To our listeners, I apologize. I will be better.
Okay, also, Selena doesn't just stop at the cloak. She goes a little further to help out our girl Kaltain, and she goes and she tells Kale. She tells him how she's being kept down there, what Selena thinks is happening, and she also tells Nehemia, which Nehemia is the one who like prompts this whole conversation. Nehemia is like, "Have you told the captain?" And Selena's like, "Yes, I already told him." And then she says, quote, "No need to mention that after Kale had returned to his bedroom, where Selena had been reading, his tunic was rumpled, his knuckles were raw, and there was a deadly sort of gleam in his chestnut eyes that told Selena the dungeon guard was going to have some serious changes and new members." And I love Kale. This is hot. Like he went down there. I'm assuming he like his knuckles were raw, so he like put some people in their place and stood up for what was right because someone had to. Someone in power. Obviously, what could Selena do? Like she can't change anything for Kaltain. So it is really, again, adds to that layer of like Kale, like, yes, he is the dutiful captain of the guard, but when asked to step up and really make a decision based on like what is morally right, what is ethically right, he does typically do the right thing. Like he's not going to allow this lady, this woman who, yes, poisoned his girl, but he's not going to like allow her to be treated like this. And I think that's, again, I'm a Kale lover, but like it was a really hot but also sweet moment from Kale.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, I think like he had to handle business. Like he is, even though like he is grappling with these feelings of like his moral compass kind of like being out of whack, like ultimately like he will always be at the core, like this character who will always be by the book. And when people aren't following the book, he will right that wrong because that's just who he is. Like fundamentally, like that's who he is. And that's like who he always is, like throughout the series, even though like he does go through such a huge like character growth arc. I feel like he still like fundamentally always is like this is what it says I should be doing. So he always, I feel like, grapples with that. But in this moment, it was such a good moment because as he should. Like,
so at the end of this conversation, after Nehemia, asks Selena, like, did you tell Kale? They start getting into this, like, it seems almost like this planned download from Nehemia about Terrasen and Terrasen's former glory and the court and the power and the bravery and the loyalty. And we get like some really interesting things here, which the biggest thing for me is that, and I didn't know this, I don't think we know this until this point, but like the king of Otterland targeted Terrasen first because it was the strongest, because if Terrasen had been given the chance to raise an army against him, Otterland would have been annihilated. My father still says that if Terrasen were to rise again, it might stand a chance. It would be a genuine threat to Otterland. And then she says, do you think another court like that could ever rise again? Not just in Terrasen, but anywhere.
I think it's so crazy because like, you're right. Like up until this point, like obviously we knew that Terrasen had been targeted, right? Because of Aelin and like Selena and her parents and stuff. But to think of the fact that like Terrasen was the strongest and could have possibly overthrown the king, it like makes me wonder also like with all of this. So if you think about like on the map, right? So Otterlin was mostly human from what right? Because then Terrasen was mostly Fae. So that was why, but then you also have the witches to the west, which I think is so interesting because they all were like, technically we're all in like their own courts in a sense.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think we should save some of that for the Maas first. But yes, they
Yeah.
are all put in like their little bubbles.
Territories.
But
yeah.
I think like, yeah, like they have their little sections, and it does seem like, I mean, we don't get like full categories in Throne of Glass the way that we get them in other SJM books. Like Crescent City has, you know, it's like hierarchy, it's categories. Akatar also has its courts, like you said. So it's just, it is interesting that they're all put in like their little bubbles. And that like, regardless of like the King of Otterland and what he meant to do, it's just so interesting that like her kingdom was the strongest kingdom. And like, that's who he went after. Like, I just feel like we didn't know that up until this point, and it just puts so much into perspective because like when you're, I wish that this was brought up again when she starts kind of laying out how that night went down. Because you don't understand how they, you know, you understand that they were like out in like their country home essentially, right? That I think that's what she calls it. Like they're not in their castle necessarily, but like they were purposefully taken by surprise because the king knew if he didn't take them by surprise, they would take him down, like they would win. And that question that like Nehemia asks, like, do you think another court like that could ever rise again? It does. The answer is yes. It does rise again under Aelin's rule.
Yeah. Selena like has such an emotional response like to the discussion. Like anytime Terrasen is mentioned, Selena is always kind of like her emotions get heightened because she knows that like her court and her people were strong, but like ultimately like that the strongness of her court didn't last like through the king's rule, which I think also in turn like makes her question like what type of power does the king have, because if my people were so strong, like how did my people fall? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And she does like come to understand that like part of the reason why her people fell is because the king had what we would consider like an unnatural amount of power, and he needed to have that amount of power to do what he did. You know, I love questions like this because like I always think about the last, like the epilogue of Kingdom of Ash, where the king's flame is blooming and like things are all right. And like this question is answered by that chapter. Like, do you think another court like that could ever rise again? And ultimately, like we get the answer that it's yes. Like it's just, it's really like full circle. Again, like rereads are so important with this series because you don't, like, yes, when you finish Kingdom of Ash, it feels full circle. It feels like things are right, but you don't really get that feeling of like, wow, look at how full circle this is unless you do a reread.
I did not like, obviously when I finished Throne of Glass, I was like, this is my favorite series of all time. Like nothing will ever top this series. Like it will be number one forever. I feel like as we've continued to reread, like I just have appreciated this series so much more than I did the first time, because when I read it, I was eating this shit up. I was like, after I read Crown of Midnight, I was like, more, give me more. I need more of it. I want to know what happens. And like now I'm like, oh my God, like this is why this was my favorite series. Like shit like this. Like this is why like you get so connected to the characters and to all the places and to all the arcs that we see throughout this series is because of like shit like this. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, girl, getting a little sentimental around this bitch.
Is that it?
Yeah. And scene. That wraps up our foreshadowing and analysis for today.
Slay.
And next, our favorite moments. These are moments in these set of chapters that we really just love. Throughout the set of chapters, I have two favorite moments. The first being when Kale and Selena are waiting for their reservation, and Kale says, "The next time we train, remind me to wallop you." And an older lady glares at Kale, and Selena gives her an apologetic and exasperated look as if to say, men. Selena is just a really relatable queen here. Like, she literally was the one who started this, but then she's like, oh, men, this this is just how they are. Like, I just think it's so funny. And my second favorite moment in this set of chapters is when Selena first reunites with Archer and he calls her Lena, and afterwards Kale is trying to keep like an even temper, but he ends up saying like he'd cool his temper enough to be civil. Lena, he demanded, slightly civil at least. And I just think it's so funny because, like, you know, like when you have like your significant other or whatever, like a little bit of jealousy is like healthy. Like, I feel like it's healthy, you know? It's just so funny because he tries to play it off and he's having this, like, I'm going to be cool. I'm going to be civil. And then he's like, no, fuck that. Like, you got me fucked up, girl. Like, you literally have me fucked up.
I love that moment. I love anytime Kale is jealous,
Yeah.
honestly. My favorite scene also has to do with like the whole tea room situation in this set of chapters. I love it. It's kind of silly. It's very like we're going to set him up to think they're running to each other like by chance. And one, I love that. I love that like scheming aspect of it, of like, you know, they're going to make him think that that's what happened. But also, I love like the info download that we get about Rifthold and like how the tea room is described, how like the street is described in these carriages and all of that. Like, I think I've said this like 3 times in this episode, but like, it really is giving Bridgerton in the best way. And again, it just like really like shows to us as readers, like there are two sides to Rifthold. And one of them is like these places that are like full of wealthy people with the tea and the gossip and like the court ladies. And, you know, you can just imagine them in their like fluffy hair and makeup and all of that and like dresses. And then you get like the Rifthold that is like dangerous and seedy and scary. And it's really like this tea scene is like one of the first times where like we really see Selena like outside of the castle. Like she's so often in the castle or like on a mission that we don't really see Rifthold through her eyes or like these different sides of Rifthold until maybe like later on in the series, you know, in Queen of Shadows and all of that, we do get a little bit of it. But it's really fun to see how it's described and like all of these different elements at play were just like really fun to read.
The last thing that we're going to talk about are just our final thoughts, like about this set of chapters. So for me, I really love how Dorian is portrayed in these set of chapters. I really think that this is the point in the series where Dorian begins to kind of like develop into a character that he becomes throughout the rest of the series. Like, he is grappling like with this sense of like, who is he and like who does he want to be? And then he also starts to like get in tune kind of with his magic a little bit, like regardless of if he knows it or not at this point. Like, he doesn't know at this point, but like I just think like this set of chapters really starts to like, you see like a slow wheel turning for Dorian, and like then this is when we start getting shadow hands, and like we love shadow hands. And I just love, like, I don't know, I just love Dorian, and like I think that this set of chapters is just like it, he breaks out of that like crown prince role, and like he really starts to like show more emotions than just like flirty king, like flirty prince. Like he shows like that he has more depth to him than just like, I like Selena, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
and I also love these set of chapters because we get introduced to Mort, and I love Mort, and I really just want to know what happened to him. Like, we never really get to see him again after this book. Like, we don't know what happens with him, and like it would have been really nice to like at the end when she goes back to like the glass castle and like they end up blowing that bitch up, but like it would have been nice to, like, for like a reminisce moment that like she's finally grappled with the fact that she is Aelin, and like to see more and like see his like reaction to being like, oh, like now you're Aelin Galathynius. Like, I knew that shit the whole time. Like, I don't know, like it just would have been like a really funny exchange and like a full circle moment, like from her being Selena Sardothian to her being Aelin Galathynius, and like him knowing from the jump. But I feel like this is just like the beginning. Like, this is just the beginning of the crazy shit that happens in this book. And I feel like at this point, like it still does feel like a little innocent. Like, we're not fully like understanding like what's happening yet as like first time readers. But then like going back, you're like, oh wait, this is before shit hits the fan. So yeah.
Yeah. I think for my like closing thoughts is I really love to see Selena's duality. I kind of touched on this like earlier on, but it's really something we like see throughout the whole series. And like, yes, she's a deadly badass assassin. And then when she learns to control her magic, she's like a fire breathing bitch queen. Like, she is just a badass. Okay. But Selena's also like really feminine and soft and compassionate. And we see that like so much in this set of chapters. Like, yeah, she's cunning and smart and she can trick Archer into thinking that like, they've run into each other and she can scheme like no one else. But she can also like step into her femininity and wear the red dress and go out to dinner and flirt. And she is compassionate when she gives Kaltain her cloak. Like she is such a well-developed, complex female character. And I love that because again, I did not have the chance to read this when I was a teenager, but I know that if I had, like, I would have wanted to be like her because you can be strong and badass, but you can be soft and feminine. And Selena/Aelin, like, she shows us that time and time again. And you really start to see that like duality in these chapters, which I just love.
And that wraps up our deep dive for chapters 6 through 10 for Crown of Midnight. We hope you enjoyed our analysis and theories. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok, where our handle is @BookishRealmsPod.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on these chapters, so drop us a comment or send us a message. Also, leave us a rating if you like what you heard. It really helps us out.
Join us next week when we continue our Crown of Midnight deep dive with chapters 11 through 16. Until then, keep reading, Assassins.
Bye!